So welcome. Thanks for joining us today. On today's show, we have Victoria. Now, I first met Victoria a few years ago when we'd done the 2-day personal breakthrough workshop. So quite a while ago now. So we're excited to have her on the show today. So welcome, and thanks for joining us, Victoria.
Thank you very much for inviting me to come on. It's great to be part of this.
Excellent. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Tell about your story. What's your background?
My background is, and the reason I went into working in nutrition and coaching was I was studying genetics and for my degree, and I was learning about how our genes kind of like determine. And at that time, because it was so many years ago, we thought that our genes had a much more of an influence on our health and well-being, like more so than the environment. Now we know the environment plays a much larger role. But I started to, because I looked at my genes, and in my mum's side of the family, there's a lot of disease, lots of heart disease and lots of cancer. And I started to think about what is it that I can actually do to improve, my own health and well-being when my genes are likely not going to be that great. So I actually then went on to study nutrition so that I could gather that information for myself and just do things to, help me improve my own health and well-being. And then when I was with my clients offering them advice in nutrition, there were some people that it worked really easy for, and I hate to, completely generalize in terms of genders. I'd speak to guys and I speak to men, and I'd sort of say, do this and do that. And they were really good at taking instructions and doing what I'd said. And they'd come back there, I did that and I've got these results, and right, what's the next step? Often when it came to my female clients, it wasn't quite as easy. And so that's when I started to think about what can I do to help people actually change their behaviors and looking at changing their patterns. Because again, sweeping generalization, but I always found that women, and I myself included, we have a slightly more emotional relationship sometimes with food. Not all, and there are men who are like that too, but it was just a pattern that I saw emerging. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And that's where coaching was, the natural next step to sort of look at those ways that we can, elicit behavior change.
I like that. I like that you basically got into it out of pure curiosity. I think that's something that is, I think probably not happening as much these days. Like, it's very much a case of, we must go into certain positions and certain jobs, but you've kind of just gone straight into that rabbit hole and then just followed that curiosity completely. And so do you specialize more in women now, or is it still like both you work with men and women?
So I'm probably, historically, I would say, it's one of those things, your vibe attracts your tribe, what have you. I tend to work with a lot of women. I'm not saying no, I'm not going to work with men, but it's just been the way it is, because I guess one of my areas of specialty is autoimmune conditions and gut health, and women just tend to have more autoimmune conditions because it's so closely linked to gut health. The science is suggesting the reason why is also because as women, we wear more makeup, perfumes, creams, even, some of us might be sort of, we're just using more products and more stuff. And that is maybe one of the reasons we're having that more toxic overload, that we're getting more autoimmune conditions. But definitely I would say just the way it's been, I have been sort of working with more women with the coaching side of things. So recently I've started to work in executive coaching as well, and that's just kind of across the board. And I do quite a lot of corporate wellness, and of course when I go into companies, it's working with everyone. But I think on the one-to-ones, it's probably quite a lot of women.
That's really interesting that you say that there's potentially a correlation there between the products people use, because most people wouldn't connect those dots to gut health. A lot of people connect gut and food. Right, they don't really think about the other components of gut health. So what are maybe some of the other things that you think maybe get overlooked when it comes to gut health that affect it?
Absolutely. So when we talk about gut health, one of the most important things to speak about is the microbiome. So that is essentially, it's all of the microbes, fungus, virus, bacteria, like parasites that we have in our body, in our gut. Also, we've got microbiome on our skin, in the mouth as well. But it's that microbiome in the gut that is so important, and it can be affected by different things like stress, for example, can really change and alter the microbiome. Another thing is our diet. So if we're eating foods like sugar, that's going to really fuel some of the bad microbes. Antibiotics, so taking medication that's actually going to disrupt that microbiome. Overuse of antibiotics, it can kill a lot of the good bacteria, and then some of the bad guys will overgrow. And also having different, any sort of, well, not any, but a lot of different medications. So it's not just antibiotics, but things like the contraceptive pill, things like steroids, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories as well. They can have a massive impact. So if you're a person who's sort of just popping painkillers on a daily basis, and I have met people who are, they're like, oh, I just have a bad back, so I take a painkiller. That in itself is going to be really detrimental to your gut health, to your microbiome. So it's not something that might affect you, today, but in sort of 5 years down the line, you can start to experience some really serious sort of like gut health issues because of it. But yeah, stress, diet, overuse of antibiotics and other medications are kind of like the main things, really.
What would you say to someone whose first instinct is to go and get medication? Because I'm not saying there's not a place for medication, obviously there is, but when it comes to gut health, if sometimes it can actually lead to more harm than good when you think long term, what would you say to somebody that's their first point of call?
So first of all, got to say, not a doctor, so yeah, I never tell people not to take the medication. But the approach, if you look at functional medicine, it's that idea of the underlying reason behind your problem, rather than, so I'll give you an example. If somebody has severe acid reflux, and I had a client yesterday and she says she has acid reflux every day. So the typical medication would be to take some antacids. So you're reducing that stomach acid, so it gets rid of the burn right there and right then. But actually, functional medicine approach would be that the reason you're getting that is because you don't have enough stomach acid. So taking those antacids is actually, in the long term, making the situation even worse. So you want to do things to actually look at what's the underlying cause. So definitely, any medication that you're taking, anything that's synthetic, that isn't kind of natural, your body will have to excrete in terms of, there's going to be some toxins, often in it. So if you can do things the more, in a more natural way, the most natural ways as possible, that's always going to be a much better solution. So yeah, it's maybe before you sort of look to take some medication, I would say either going to a functional medicine specialist, speaking to a naturopath or a nutritionist, and actually looking at, okay, what are some of the other underlying reasons? I've had, lots of clients who've been taking medications for years, and it just makes it even more difficult to actually get back to, that natural state. So yeah, even after taking lots of antibiotics, and you know what, they save lives. There's a definite reason for people to sometimes have to take them. But I read somewhere that I think it's a third of the antibiotics that are taken in the world absolutely do nothing, because the origin of their issue was not bacterial. So it's not helping their condition. And in fact, what it's doing is just disrupting their natural microbiome. It's killing off some of the bad bacteria, but also some of the good bacteria. So it's just going to be overall detrimental to health.
That makes perfect sense. And it's interesting, you had acid reflux, didn't you? And you ended up going down the natural route.
Yeah, I actually had a hiatus hernia, was my food pipe, actually the bottom of the sphincter wasn't closing properly. And I was on some like prescription-based tablets for many years, which helped daily, but I couldn't stand taking them. I got to a point where I wanted to fix it permanently, like again, find the cause and actually fix it. And again, the cause was my gut wasn't functioning properly. Basically, my diaphragm wasn't working correctly. So I went down the route of, again, allowing my body to actually fix itself by focusing on how I think, obviously, meditation, breath work is to help microbiome in my gut function properly and get the right signals to actually help heal me. And that's what it did. And I haven't had acid reflux for
years now.
Well, probably about 10 years now.
Oh wow, nice.
And without taking, and it all started from, again, not taking medication, and it was just again allowing my body to heal itself, which is what it can do. But again, we have to give it the right environment to do so with the foods we eat, the way we think, and so on. And then our body will naturally heal itself and do what it needs to do, which is quite interesting from a performance perspective as well, because when I was exercising, when I was training, that really did affect how hard I could train, all the results I was getting, because that acid reflux would always come up the higher the intensity I do, which would obviously affect not only my training, but then would affect my sleep, my work, everything. So from your perspective and the clients that you see, how important how important is your gut to performance when it comes to their career, their work life, exercise, their sleep, relationships, everything really?
It's a big question. It's so important, you know. The gut is the second brain, so it's so important in so many different areas. Like even with the current times that we're in at the moment, and looking at the immunity, you've got 70 to 80% of the immune system is housed in the gut. So obviously we need, for us to be at our best, we need to be able to have a highly functioning immune system. Also in terms of performance, in terms of our moods, serotonin, 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, and it's thought that that will have an impact on serotonin in the brain as well. So that's the feel-good neurotransmitter. So that's really really important to make sure it's working well. But if your gut, so we've got this something called the vagus nerve is connecting our brain to our gut. And we have these bidirectional lines of communication. So we get messages from the gut up to the brain and the brain down to the gut. So if and actually you can think of it like this, you know, when you feel, or the last time you had butterflies, can you remember that?
Yeah.
Why did you get butterflies?
Because my brain was telling me I was excited.
Yeah, exactly. We had an emotional experience, and it affected our digestive system, that was a feeling down here. And if you think about, have you had sort of, you know, diarrhea? I was gonna, yeah, I've just said it. Have you had diarrhea recently? That might be something to edit out. Sorry, this is just my job. But yeah, or have you been constipated or had diarrhea recently? Have you had any sort of, you know, gastrointestinal problems of late, or when was the last time you had some issues?
Well, for me, it was the last time that I ate too much sugar.
Okay. And do you, if you think back to that time, can you think back to how you felt up here, like in your head?
For sure, definitely. Literally, I remember complete brain fog. Brain would not work at all. Focus just went out the window. All I wanted to do was just sit there and kind of mung out and stare into space for the rest of the day.
Exactly. And do you know what? I think there are a lot of people who are living their lives on a daily basis like that. You know, I guess I see a lot of those people because they come to me and they've been suffering with digestive health issues for like years, but that just becomes their new norm, so they get used to it. So the idea is, if we're having gastrointestinal problems, you know, whether that is like loose stools or things like constipation, whatever it might be, we're not going to be feeling great in our head. And so in terms of performance, that's going to have a massive effect. Like you mentioned, things like brain fog. You know, there can be things like an overgrowth of candida, which is really, really common. I see it a lot with my clients, and that can definitely, one of the main symptoms is getting that sort of brain fog. And even there have been some connections with things like candida and anxiety too. So it has a massive impact on our moods, on our energy levels, on our brain's ability to function. So if our gut isn't functioning well, our brains haven't been functioning well. And in fact, there's research showing now, if we have an inflamed gut, so if we have that leaky gut, those gaps forming in the gut lining, which anyone with an autoimmune condition has, it's a prerequisite for it, then we are also going to have an inflamed brain. So we actually know that now, that it causes this inflammation to occur in our brain, and nobody wants that. So we're just not going to be able to, yeah, nobody wants an inflamed brain. It's not good. We know we need to look after our brain to look after our gut, and vice versa. And obviously that's, yeah, really important for performance. Sorry.
what would you say? Because I've had a couple of clients that have like come to me and like they're experiencing high levels of stress or anxiety, and then they notice that suddenly something just doesn't feel right within like their gut. They just know like they're experiencing different kinds of symptoms. But obviously then over time, when we work together and we work through the stress and all of that side, naturally everything else starts to line up. I think that's a very interesting pattern to see. But what else could I say to somebody that is experiencing that from a gut health perspective? For example, maybe the foods they're consuming that would work really nicely as like a simple and practical step for somebody that's maybe in those early stages of noticing maybe a few symptoms that could be stress related.
Sure. So there's probably two parts to answer this. The first thing is that when, and particularly now, when everyone's a little bit more stressed than maybe where we were, you know, in January, February this year, when we are stressed, the body will shut down some of the other systems. So it shuts down the digestive system in order to be able to put a lot of focus on dealing with that stressor. The problem is when it's when we're chronically stressed, it means that a lot of us are, you know, operating with not a fully functioning digestive system. We're just switching it off entirely. So I've had clients where, you know, they have started to eat all the correct foods and they've started to take the recommended supplements, they're exercising, but they're still not improving. And it's because they are still not doing anything to manage their stress levels, you know, in terms of even just practicing like through some breath work to practice some mindfulness meditation, some breath work to actually switch on their digestive system or switch off the stress response. So just knowing when you are stressed, your digestive system is never going to be functioning optimally. So a lot of people might be experiencing during this moment, you know, during this time, excessive bloating, acid reflux, you know, constipation, whatever it might be, or like things like fatigue, brain fog, because they're not doing stuff to switch on their digestive system. But in terms of people in the earliest stages of, you know, experiencing a bit of digestive discomfort, a bit of some issues, I would say the main foods that people have issues with are going to be things like, you know, gluten, dairy, caffeine can be another thing for people. Sugar is massively pro-inflammatory. Like, you know, you mentioned yourself there, Jonathan, about when you were eating lots of sugar, how that kind of, you know, didn't work out too well for you. So yeah, yeast can be another thing, but in general, sugar and gluten, dairy would be kind of like the main ones. The thing with having food intolerances is that it could, if you go and do a food intolerance test, it will only look at the protein within those foods that you might be intolerant to. So if you come up with intolerance to, or say you go and test dairy and you know you're lactose intolerant, but it doesn't come up dairy when you do the food intolerance test, it's like, oh, that's fair enough, because they don't check for lactose there. But equally, there are, in some other foods, there are other say, you know, sort of components of those foods that people can react to. So for example, some people with autoimmune conditions, things like arthritis, might react to things like nuts or seeds or tomatoes, like nightshade vegetables. So it can almost become quite overwhelming. So I probably won't go into too much of a list there. But the main starting block, I would say, getting rid of particularly modern day wheat, so, and gluten in that form. So if you still want to have bread, for example, sourdough is going to be better than your normal bread because it's fermented wheat, so it's a bit easier for the body to digest. And a lot of people are okay with sourdough, but they eat a normal bit of bread and, you know, they get really bloated, or they might have a skin issue, or they might just feel really tired. Because the other thing is, when it comes to being a bit sensitive to a food, it's not always going to show up just in terms of your, you know, bit of bloating or something to do with your digestion. It could be that you get more spots. So when I eat lots of dairy, I just get pimples. It's really annoying. And the other thing that I get with dairy, I just feel really apathetic, I would say. So I just go, I just don't really care. It's odd. I just, yeah, it affects, things will affect people in different ways. So getting rid of dairy and gluten, sugar and caffeine for about 30 days. That means that you've got rid of it from your system, and then you can start to reintroduce those foods one by one and see, you know, which out of them, you know, you might actually be sensitive to.
That's really important what you said there. Well, obviously it was all important, but what you said there at the end about like 30 days, like, and then get like introducing things back into the system, because a lot of people, especially traditionally, people jump from one diet to the next to try and fix things. So by being able to reset the system and then re-engage with it, I think is absolutely essential for anybody that's listening that might be doing that, or anybody that is tempted to do that. That reset is absolutely essential, I think. I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And even if, for example, you are somebody who is having quite severe digestive health issues, you might want to experiment with getting rid of grains entirely for those 30 days. It's not to say you can never have grains again, but for some people, they do just cause them some issues. And then it's also really important. It's not just removing those foods, but it's about then healing. So there are 4 R's of gut healing. I don't know if you're familiar with the 4 R's.
Tell us.
So the 4 R's of gut healing, the first one is that we want to remove. So you're getting rid of anything that potentially could cause issues. So, it could be things like removing grains, in particular, removing anything with gluten, dairy, sugar. For some people, eggs, but eggs can be really great for a lot of people, and things like caffeine. So removing those foods that could be causing some issues. Even things like, artificial sweeteners are a good thing to remove as well. So the second R is going to be restore, where we need to restore the body's sort of things like digestive enzymes, stomach acid, stuff like that. So, for example, you could restore stomach acid naturally with things like lemon or raw apple cider vinegar. Even things like sauerkraut is really good for stomach acid too. Sometimes people might need to use a supplement. So things like betaine HCl with pepsin can be really, really good to help restore that stomach acid. Also might need to take things like digestive enzymes. So, literally just having, if you're someone who's getting a lot of bloating, maybe you just can't break down your food very well. So maybe taking, one digestive enzyme with each meal could work. So we've got remove, restore, then re-inoculate. So this is getting the good bacteria back into the body. And a great way of doing that, there's a couple of things you can do. Having probiotics in supplement form and in food form. So fermented foods, things like kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha are really, really good. Taking some probiotics as well. The one thing that I will say when it comes to probiotics, they help you during that time where you're healing. But the good bacteria that you're taking in that supplement form, they're transient. So they are actually going to leave the body. So we want to really, the best way to build up your natural microbiome again is all through feeding it the prebiotics. So the food that the good bacteria, the foods that the good bacteria like, those prebiotics. And just really a wide variety of plant-based fibers. So some of the best prebiotics, natural ones, would be things like onion, garlic, like raw onion, raw garlic, so get a bit smelly, asparagus, artichoke, green banana. So that's quite good. You can add a bit of green banana into your smoothie or get some green banana flour. Chicory root is also really quite good as well. Things like flax seeds are pretty good. So they help to feed that good bacteria. So that's the third R, the re-inoculate. And then finally, the 4th R is going to be repair. So you need to make sure you're repairing that gut lining. So often when people have digestive health issues, and as I mentioned before, definitely in any autoimmune condition, people will have a leaky gut. So it's where the cells of your intestine should be tightly junctioned like this, and then they should open up and close intermittently to let nutrients in and out. But for some people, they open up and they just stay like that. So it means when you eat food, you're not properly able to digest that food, and undigested proteins will escape out into the bloodstream. And also things like bacteria, all sorts of stuff can escape out. So it just causes increased inflammation in the body. So it's one of the most important things that you need to do is repairing that gut lining. Something that I often see in people is that when they'll get like a food intolerance test and they'll just say, oh, I'll just won't have those foods. But they're missing out the 3 other R's. It's not just about removing those foods. You've got to look at the other areas of gut health.
That's really, really common, because like a lot, that was my association with intolerances. If you've got an intolerance, then you cut something out and then boom, job done, right? You start to feel better, and it does to a point, but I think there needs to be a more of an intelligent approach to it, like obviously you just mentioned. If you've got somebody, let's say we've got somebody listening to this that's experiencing some symptoms that you've kind of mentioned, and they're kind of resonating, thinking, yeah, this might be something I need to pay more attention to in terms of gut health. Obviously, you've already given loads of really good like tips of things that people could do, but what do you think like the first thing is? Do you think they should go away and just try things for themselves and see what works and what reaction they get? Or do you think, no, first step is just save time, go see a specialist, come see somebody like you, for example, and then get the ball rolling? They need to dabble first, or can they come straight to
It's, you know, it's one of those things. It depends how intuitive a person is as well. So I think it's always good, even before you go and speak to someone, to start having maybe a food and mood diary, food, mood and symptoms, so that when you turn up to your appointment, you're actually ready and prepared, and you can say, look, this is what I've been eating and this is what I've been experiencing, and this is what's happening with my energy levels, with my mood, with my sleep, just so that it you know, it's a dream. I've had a couple of clients turn up with that, and you just go, it makes it so much easier when they've already thought about this stuff themselves. So definitely it's good for you to just become a bit more aware of actually what's going on, even taking a note of like what's happening with your stools. Like, are you going to the toilet every day? Because if you're not, you're constipated. Even if you're going every day, but you know, you're having to push really hard, or they're little pellets, that you're constipated. So there's something called the Bristol stool chart, which you can have a look up, and it can show you what a good, nice stool looks like, and you can aim for that nice stool. And if you're not having stools like that, then there's something that's not quite right. And I've just thought about the 4 R's. What we actually should do is add on a 5th R, which is like relaxation, whatever that like would look like, because that's a really, really important part of the entire healing process, because, you know, our brains and our guts are so interlinked that without that de-stressing, that, you know, rest, prioritizing rest, you're not able to actually press that like reset button as such.
No, that's it's funny you said that, actually, because I was about to kind of mention that about 5th R. It's something that I do with my clients, which is, as our class says, retrain their mind. So in terms of how they think about food, the language they use with food, and also about, again, how to, like you said, relax and de-stress their mind through breath work. Because again, that's going to be extremely important to helping the gut heal as well. So you remove all those foods, but like you said, if you're still stressed and you're still worried about all these things, that healing is not going to go on. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And when you reintroduce those foods back in, you're going to get the same problem and the same issues again and again. So I definitely believe that the mindset, in terms of how you respond and how you perceive foods, plays a massive part in how your gut actually digests and deals with it as well.
Definitely. Like, even you know, talking about clients that I've seen recently, there was one lady who she was being sort of, you know, oh, I'm being really good, and then she would have a few days where she'd sort of indulge, and then she would beat herself up so much for it. And it, you know, the whole idea is that we are human after all. If you want to have something sweet, like it's okay to do these things, but when you do it, like, own it, enjoy it. Don't beat yourself up for it, because then that's 2-3 times as bad as what, you know, just enjoy it. It's okay to have a little bit of stuff like here and there. It's that whole 80-20, you know, it's definitely, you don't want to be having that sugar on a daily basis. And a lot of people realistically, like, still are, like, maybe it's they're adding a bit of sugar to their tea or coffee, or they're having a chocolate bar a day, or whatever it might be. So to be more aware, even for example, you know, having like low fat strawberry yogurt, that is packed with sugar. That's going to be as much sugar as almost having strawberry ice cream. But a lot of people would have something like that for breakfast. So just maybe becoming a bit more aware and a bit more conscious of what you're eating, like when it comes to on a day-to-day basis, and just cleaning it up, going for the whole foods. But every now and then, like, you know, I like sort of, you know, things like cheesecake and stuff, and I have these things. It's not all the time, and I go for like, where I can, sort of, you know, things that have been sweetened, say like with dates or bananas, whatever, like natural sweeteners, or maybe like a dairy free. There's some really good stuff that we can get in Dubai. There's some good sort of like vegan ice cream sandwiches, and they're actually really, really clean. When you look at the ingredients, they're probably still going to have a decent impact on my blood sugar levels, 100%. But it's not the same as, you know, having some Haagen-Dazs, you know. So it's just cleaning the products up.
Yeah, and I think becoming more savvy about the choices you make when it comes to being aware of marketing and how things are marketed is essential as well. Because you're absolutely right. Somebody could be having like a low sugar based yogurt for breakfast, and actually it's the same as having a bowl of ice cream, but they would never do that, right? So it's being intelligent enough with your choices that you're actually looking beyond what says healthy on the labels and things like that. I mean, I think that's something become a bit more well-to-do, but I think people are still very sucked into the marketing systems. For example, I didn't realize this until about a year ago, that supermarkets literally place items on the shelves at like this height of kids that they're targeting to give products to. And for me, I was like, really? They do that? Like, I knew they was like trying to trick people into selling healthy food, not so healthy, right? But I was like, to the extremes that they're going to. And I don't want this to be like a marketing bash, obviously, but I think it's absolutely paramount to helping people make the right decisions when it comes to their choices.
Definitely. Like, read those labels. And even talking about going to supermarkets, a good tip is to have a list of what you're going to buy, rather than when you're walking around going, do I buy this, do I buy that? Because what happens is we get this like decision fatigue, and it's something that we get throughout our day anyway. If you're in the supermarket for like half an hour and you're like making all these decisions, by the time you get to the counter, which is where they have all the sweeties and stuff like that, your willpower, because your decision fatigue, as we fatigue the brain, is connected to willpower, we're much more likely to sort of buy the sweets if you don't have a list for your supermarket trip. So just automating things as much as you can, organizing yourself, like really helps with that, and in terms of having more willpower.
And don't go shopping when you're hungry.
Yeah, definitely not. My husband gets quite hangry, so he is like he's the person that just starts eating in the supermarket. He's like, I don't care, like with his chicken, he's like, I need to do it. And you get to the end, it's like we've just got all these empty packets of stuff. It's like, yeah, sorry. The man's a beast.
I love that. It sounds like him and John will get on like a house on fire. Because it's true. It's like that question, isn't it? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because there's so many factors that influence all of these, and by us trying to untangle it and unravel it and at least see the relationship of it, it helps people to understand maybe where they need to focus more. Because a lot of the things that we've spoke about, and one of the reasons why we created wellness theory in the first place, was because we learned somewhere along the line that it's not just about the body, right? Then we started to learn, okay, it's not just about the mindset. And then we started to learn, okay, it's not just about emotions, right? And we just continue on that little pathway. And essentially we need to start connecting those dots to be able to make sure that we're all focusing in the area that we need to the most, because a lot of people tend to focus on one or the other, or one or two, and they don't think about the big picture. So by now, like, including gut health into, you know, the way we think and the way we make our decisions can really be the difference between like performing at a mediocre level and performing at a high level as well.
Absolutely. Just in terms of like brain function, you know, like I mentioned, so that we don't have that an inflamed gut leads to an inflamed brain, and the fact that when we have that dysbiosis, that imbalance of the microbiome, we're going to be feeling brain fog, we're going to be feeling that tiredness, we can be more anxious. So you're just not going to be in terms of performance, you know, your best self, really. You're not going to be the best version of yourself. You're always going to be kind of like battling, you know. And I know years ago when I had some digestive health issues, it was by 4 o'clock I was just like absolutely wiped, you know. It's like it's a goner. But then there's also, like you sort of mentioned, the thoughts and the emotions. I'm a you know, big fan, and you know, another thing that I do with my clients as well is like looking at those limiting beliefs and what are the performance enhancing thoughts versus the performance inhibiting thoughts. Like, you know, a lot of us are just beating ourselves up like way too often. You kind of like say to my clients, like, would you speak to the way you speak to yourself, would you speak to your best friend like that, or your family member? And of course we wouldn't. We're just so mean to ourselves. So it's about just sort of being a bit nicer to yourself.
Exactly.
Definitely. So over the last 5 years then, what new belief, behavior or habit do you think has most improved your life?
Undoubtedly, for me, it's all about my sleep. Sleep is the superpower. Since sort of getting into coaching, I would say I've gone from going to bed, going to sleep, falling asleep by about 12 to being a 9 p.m.er. Bit sad, but true. And I feel great. I go to bed early, I wake up early. I'm monitoring my sleep as well, so I use the Aura ring. I don't know if you guys
I was going to ask you if that was an Aura ring.
I was like, where is the phone? Yeah, Aura party.
In the club.
That's been quite transformational, just looking at what are the little things that affect my sleep. Having half a glass of wine, like just a small glass of wine, it's like, wow, you know, your readiness, heart rate variability, it's like, that's kind of scary. Even, for example, certain foods, if I eat too much sugar, like that affects it. So but yeah, it's all about my sleep and getting into bed early, maximizing that sleep. Once I've had a good night's sleep, I get up and I go and I do something to sort of sweat, so I go and train as soon as I wake as well, and then I'm just kind of set up for the day. That's energy soaring, and everything sort of, you know, comes from there. There's a really interesting thing I saw in a Harvard Business Review when they talk about the performance pyramid. I don't know if you've seen that. They talk about the corporate athlete and how we have 4 different like well springs for energy. So from our body, our emotions, our mind, and our spirit, so like purpose, whatever that means to you. And they say that in order to be at your best, be performing at a peak state, a peak performer under pressure, we need to have all of those different levels working together. And the foundation of it is the physical, like sleep, nutrition, and movement. And then linking each of those different levels are the rituals, basically. So, you know, getting to sleep, getting up early, exercising. So those physical rituals that really sort of set me up to get into those different levels of the pyramid.
Nice. You're preaching to the choir there. That's like the whole foundation we do. Like, honestly, like I am in such strong agreement with you that like sleep is the foundation. It's like if you're trying to build a house, the sleep is actually the foundation of everything when you're trying to build the best you. Because if your sleep's not good, your body can't respond to the exercise you do. If your sleep's not good, you can't think right. If your sleep's not good, you can't even digest food properly. So it just has this knock-on effect and this like domino effect for everything else. And same as you, I mean, we've been using Aura rings for a while now, and it's been really, really, really beneficial just to see those smallest things, the smallest things that you wouldn't expect. Like light in the room or the temperature in the room and those things, because I knew them, you know, we know them because we hear it and we've learned it, but to experience it within yourself, and when you're the one that tweaks it, and then you're like, wow, and you see the result the next day. I mean, that's really useful from keeping the habit kind of mentality as well.
Totally. Got to track it to hack it, right?
Exactly. I like that.
Exactly. So, Victoria, what one piece of practical advice, you've given a lot of advice obviously in this episode, which is awesome, but if you had to pick one piece of practical advice that you could give someone, especially someone who's very new to even thinking about gut health or really kind of confused on what to do, what one piece of practical advice would you give and why?
When I get asked this question, I always go back to the thing that all of us can do. It's free, kind of easy-ish, but it's just to focus on our breathing and slowing everything down and actually being in the moment, because it's kind of the source of everything, you know. So I would just say, like, even if I say to my clients, even if they have never practiced any form of like breath work, even if you look at before you eat, you know, taking 2 to 3 minutes of just doing that deep belly, that diaphragmatic breathing and slowing it all down, it's going to be really, really beneficial. Then if you can, you know, take it to the next level. Like there's so many great guided meditations, you know, looking at those sorts of things just to be a bit more in tune. Just in tune with your breath and just slowing everything down. It's the most basic simple thing, but I think it's actually, for me personally, it's been really, really important in terms of my performance and my well-being.
Same. Yeah, I think we've experienced the same level of just expansion, personally, professionally, everything, just from focusing on breath. I was never conscious of my breath at all. And in hindsight, that would have saved me in a lot of awkward situations probably. And it's so easy, like you said, it is free. It's something we can all do. We've actually got in our meditation library some breath audio guided soundtracks. So if anybody's listening to this, obviously just reach out, let us know, and we can send you the info for that. Is there any that you would recommend that you really like? Any breath?
I'm a bit into the I did the Wim Hof experience. I did it with my sister actually. I'm quite into the looking at like that hypoxia. There's actually a really good guy called the Renegade Pharmacist. I love that name as well. And he does a lot of this breath work, like soma breath work. And I do that a few times a week. So before talking with you guys, I had a presentation that I had to give today. And as part of my rituals to sort of prime me for, you know, performance as such, I'll do that. It's a half an hour guided meditation where, you know, there's a lot of you holding your breath, and you come out after that and you just feel like it's amazing. Like it's I can't really describe it in words, but you feel all sparkly eyed, and it's
like
awesome.
a natural high.
Yeah, but it's a total natural high. It's amazing. At certain points, like you're you know, you feeling all tingly in your limbs. It's like, I'm really enjoying this, and it's just through breath. So yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Awesome. Listen, that's brilliant. I'm so happy that we've had you on our podcast. I think our listeners are going to love you. We love you already, and I think it's really important that our listeners know where they can find you. So where can they find you, either on social media or website and such?
Sure. So on Instagram, it's the handle is just Victoria Tipper, and on Facebook, again, I think it's Victoria Tipper Nutrition and Coaching. And then I've got a website, victoria-tipper.com. It's terrible, isn't it? I should really know these things a bit better than that. And also, it's just my name. Wow, it's that Thursday afternoon feeling there. It's like, yeah. Instagram's probably the thing that I would be using a little bit more so, yeah.
All right, perfect. We'll put the links in the notes anyway, so people can find you, and we'll obviously tag you in any posts, so they will be over, they'll be on you, they'll be listening to all these amazing tips. So we really is there anything else from you, John?
No, just want to say thank you for obviously being on our show and sharing your insights with all of our listeners. It's been very profound, and we're very grateful to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. So thanks, guys.